Welcome into my kitchen. I am so happy because I get to share with you some of my greatest recipes. Today, we are going to make lobster stock. Something that's easy to make just using the lobster shells and turn it into pasta with lobster sauce. Something that I would call perfect, the Langoustine Sliders. And we end with white chocolate pudding. Mamma mia. And today, we're going to discuss how the Stellino family was attacked by a giant lobster in their kitchen. Come for the recipes. Stay for the story. I am 60 years old. So the story to make sense, you have to place it about 53 years ago. I just turned 7. My brother was 5.5. My father on this one Sunday brought a whole box of fish. There were clams, mussels, and there was this creature that none of us had ever seen. The creature was all covered with seaweed that had been placed on top of it to keep it fresh. I remember my father lifting the creature, showing it to my mom, and the first thing that I noticed was a tail that went back and forth, and claws that kept clipping like this. And my mom looking at my dad and saying, Vincenzino, ma che cos'è sta cosa? Meaning, little Vinny. My mom always called my dad little Vinny. Said, little Vinny, what is this thing? And my father, una ragosta! È una ragosta! Which in Italian, aragosta means lobster. And my mom says, hey, how do you cook this? In a pot of water in which we cook the pasta, the same pot, we cook the aragosta, and it will cook. It turns red. It becomes red afterwards. And when it's red, it's finished. My mom looked at my dad. My dad looked at my mom, and the pot was already boiling because we're about to have Sunday pasta. And she took the aragosta, and she placed it in the pot. Why am I smiling? Because I'm about to make a wonderful dish with lobster. And you're lucky. I'm going to show you how to make lobster stock, and I'm going to show you how to make this wonderful lobster sauce for pasta. Are you ready? Let me show you how to make it. It's very easy these days to make your own lobster stock. All you need to do is find a store that will sell you a lobster, that will cook it for you as well. They'll crack it open, so by the time you bring it home, all that you need to worry about is to clean the inside of the lobster, the head part of it, which I showed you how to do. Now, there's still a couple of things that we need to do because we want to use these shells to make the stock, and I want to show you exactly how. So in here we have the whole lobster that has been cracked in half already, and I want you to see it on the other side because this is the most important part. So at this point what I want to do is to crack the shell for good, and one lobster goes this way, the other piece goes the other way. And then very attentively, what I want to do is to actually take out the lobster tail. Now, this is very important. This lobster is about 1.5 pounds, and as you can see, there is very little amount of meat that's left over in the tail after we're done with this process. It's just the way in which it is. So here we go with this part. Now, here we are with the rest of the body. What I like to do is to cut the shell in smaller pieces. So here we go, one piece like this. Here we go one other piece like this. Make sure you use a nice knife and you guide it all the way through. So at this point, what I like to do is to place them into a bowl, and we'll continue with the other half of the lobster. Now, you notice that first I bring down the hand. Once I have the blade, then I push down. Do not do this unless you know where the tip of the knife is at. This is extremely important. A lot of people put themselves with the hand ahead of the knife, and they think they're gonna go and chop the lobster. This motion, very dangerous. Avoid it if you can. And here we go with the knuckle, and this part of it is gone. So this also, I will add to the bowl right in here. Now, what we have left is the knuckle meat. This requires some violence. Do not do it with a blade. Do it with the back of the knife. So the first thing that you do, you hit it right here. Once it's done, this piece right here is what comes out. And using a towel, because this will rip you apart, you want to snap it off and make sure that you take out this piece. Why the usage of the towel? I want you to see that the lobster has the spine built into it. If you go and grab it like this, it will cut you right into the skin. These are the things that you definitely want to avoid. So we have a piece of meat here on the inside, over here. another piece over here. I'll put with the other meat. And we have other pieces of shell that we'll put back in the shell. We have one more. We have broken down the shell of the lobster, and now we're ready to make the stock. Let me show you how. One of the things that people are always afraid when it does come to making a lobster stock is that it's a very difficult recipe to make. Not at all. And I'll show you exactly how. The most important ingredients are the shells. Yes, the shells are full of life. They have the essence of the lobster. But we need to be able to bring this essence out and to create the stock, because the stock is the most important part of making the sauce. So let me show you how. We have the olive oil in there. To the olive oil, we're going to add first a little bit of garlic. I cut it thick, and then we're going to start what's known as the soffritto. The soffritto is made of carrots, finely chopped, of course, onions, celery, some sprigs of thyme, which is fantastic for the sauce. Thyme is my favorite spice, and a little bit of chopped bacon. Why? You're right. Why am I putting bacon inside a stock made for fish, crustaceans that is? I have found that there's something magical about chopped bacon, and I pretty much ended up using it in most of my sauces. What it does for me, it opens up a flavor that is completely unusual. And it marries well with everything, and it gives a base that's big and strong. And even though this is about lobster, this bacon will actually marry with the lobster flavor and expand it onto the other side. For those of you that don't like bacon, do not like using bacon with fish, this is not necessary. But to me, this is one step that really takes you to the other side. At this point, we add a little bit of my magic. This is a rub that I usually put over my meats, but it works fantastic. It's a mix of salt, pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, paprika, and brown sugar, all in the same amount. The more we build the flavors at this point, the more it will take us closer to where we want to go. Oh, hey, look how beautiful it is. It's at this point that we add the shells into the pan. So for a few moments, what I want to do is to cook them into the base so that they pick up the flavor that has been developed by the base. Here now is a wonderful addition, brandy. Why brandy instead of wine? I find that brandy brings out an elegant flavor even more than wine does. But if you were to use wine, there would not be a problem. You notice that I am moving the shells around, and at the same time I'm pushing down. Why am I pushing down? I'm encouraging this squeezing of the remnant juices that are still inside of them. And trust me, there's an enormous amount of juice. This stock is going to be fantastic. At this point, most of the brandy has evaporated, and that's when we add the other ingredients. First, we go with some stock. Let's talk about the stock. Chicken stock marries wonderfully with this. Chicken stock is fairly weak in terms of personality. It means that, yes, it changes with the other ingredients that you put it into. As a matter of fact, I use it also to make a wonderful dish together with clams. If you have fish stock handy, even better. But here we go. Together with the chicken stock, we add tomato sauce. Store-bought is fine, or you can use my recipe. It's at this point that we continue mixing all these ingredients together. Now, we're going to bring this to a boil. So once it does reach a boil, the next thing that you want to do is reduce it down to a simmer, put it on the back of the stove, and let it go for 30 minutes or so. Now, let's continue, and let me show you how to make the sauce. We got the pasta in the water. All we have to do is the sauce. It's gonna be fun. I cannot wait to show you this. This is one of my favorite dishes. Plus, it reminds me of my dad. First thing we do, we add the garlic to the olive oil. And I like to add it early in the process because before I add the other ingredients, I want to get the olive oil nice and hot. And one way for us to notice this is through the garlic. As the garlic is waiting for the heat to arrive to the pan, a little bit of red pepper flakes. Why? My father used to do it. I love doing it. It's one of those things that I do all the time. For those of you that don't know it, I actually have a little piece of my dad with me today, right here, as I'm showing you this recipe. This watch right here belonged to my dad. My whole life, he was wearing it. And when he passed away, I took it with me. Actually, he gave it to me long before he passed away. He was totally surprised that I had the watch redone. Why is this watch so important? The watch works. It tells the time perfectly. But every time I wear it, I feel as if his spirit is with me. So hopefully, I will do a real honor to him by showcasing one of the best dishes he taught me. The garlic is now starting to jump exactly the way we want to. At this point, we add the onions. If they're white, if they're red, doesn't make much of a difference. They're just wonderful. At this point, our flow is to basically lower the heat a little bit and get the onion to cook on medium-low heat until they soften up wonderfully. And this is basil, fresh basil. Why am I adding it now? A lot of people have this issue, say, why, if you add the fresh basil now, it will burn, it will turn dark. But there's another thing that the basil does at this point. The basil is kind of sacrificing itself and giving itself to the sauce. We gotten what we want in here, and it's at this point that I like to add the chopped tomatoes. These are Italian peeled tomatoes. As this is cooking, I want to add one more flavor base to this to recall the flavor that we have into the lobster stocks. And that is a little bit of brandy. I'm gonna cook this until most of the brandy has evaporated. Now, at this point, you can just add salt and pepper. That would taste fantastic. But I add a little bit of my Nick Stellino special rub because I want a little bit of the onion powder, garlic powder to penetrate the paprika. This is the most important part. Now, I'm going to pay attention to this. I have the stock that has basically cooked to its perfection right next to the pan. So I'm going to be using this ladle to fill up the stock and add it. Look how beautiful it is. Look at the color that's picked up already. This is the flavor of our sauce. This is the most important thing that you could possibly do. And it is at this point that I like to add it exactly like this. Look how gorgeous it is. Mamma mia, che bellezza. Now, two schools of thoughts are. We can wait for the sauce to reduce the sauce consistency, then top it over the pasta. That's one way to go. I don't subscribe to that. Why? You have a sauce that's just beautiful. You want for the pasta to cook the last few minutes into the sauce. Now, you will notice that the pasta is slightly undercooked. You can see it by the stiffness of the pasta. This is exactly where we want to have it. I have undercooked the pasta by a full 2.5, 3 minutes because I want the last few minutes to take place here into the sauce. And to ensure the flavor even more, a little bit more stock. Most of the sauce has been absorbed, and now we want to add the lobster pieces to it. And this is a last final touch. The pasta is basically done. I'm gonna turn it off because I don't want to cook the lobster meat until it becomes tough. And it's at this point that I like to add fresh basil with a chiffonade. And at this point, I want to mix the sauce and the pasta one more time. The pasta is ready. The sauce is perfect. All we have to do is plate it. There's several ways in which you can look at this pasta. One of it is pasta with a very luxurious ingredient, lobster. But to me, it's magic, period. This pasta has the soul of my father in it, and it's a pasta that taught me how to dream. I hope that you will make it for your family, and you will find the same joy that I found when my father made it for me. And this is how you make pasta with lobster sauce. Now, for those of you at home that might attempt to actually boil a lobster, you want to make sure that the pot is big enough for the lobster to fit in. Also, make sure that the claws are bound together with those rubbers.
because what happened to this particular lobster is that it did not fit into the hot pot. And the lobster took advantage through this astonishing ability that he had with his claws to hook himself on the outer part of the pot. And as my mom was trying to drop the tail into the hot water, the lobster, as if a circus performer, flipped outward on top of the stove, down into the floor, under the cabinets. All that I could hear was a clickety, 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 clickety. I knew this creature was somewhere. I got so terrified, I jumped on top of my chair. My brother got more scared than me, jumped on the chair first and then on the table. And then I remember my father, Mastroianni, to the right! And my mother to my father, Vincenzino, to the left. They both had brooms trying to capture this lobster that was running through the kitchen, trying to find a way out.
They're not lobsters, they're not shrimps. They're langoustine. What do I do with them? Sliders. Let me show you how to make it. So, are you always in a good mood? I am. How do I do that? I cook and I eat the food that I make. But I have to say, one of the greatest sandwiches I've ever had was a lobster sandwich. I had it in New Hampshire, landlocked. Yet, in New Hampshire, there must be a culture about lobster sandwiches that to me, it was like, oh my God. But one of the things that I realized is that there is a certain skill in how to bring together very simple ingredients, basically no more than 3 or 4 at most, and through the freshness of the product, create something that really has a fantastic personality. Enough talking. Let me show you how to make it because this is a very difficult recipe. The langoustines, I bought them like this at the store, and they are already cooked and shelled. So we're gonna place them right here into our bowl. Now, the next thing that I like to do to this is celery. Why celery? It was the way in which I had it when I had the lobster roll, and I don't want to change anything. I believe that this celery has an enormous importance in the taste that it does have. Chopped white onions, a small amount, but super, super fine chop because I do not want to feel them while I bite into it. I just want them to share the flavor. The next additional flavor is Nick's Magic Rub, or Nick's Special Rub, or Nick's Invention. What is the name? I don't know. I came up with stuff all the time, I forgot. But why is this important? Why does it add? Salt, pepper, equal parts, onion powder, garlic powder, paprika, and brown sugar. It's important to us because it has a series of elements of flavor which are truly, truly spectacular. But as of right now, we have not yet completed the mission. The mission is only completed when we add the mayonnaise. The mayonnaise will add for 2 ways for us. One as a binding agent, keeping together all these wonderful tales of the langoustine, and this is quite important that it gets done this way. The other part about it is also has a flavor of its own that it imparts into the langoustine and marries with all the other additional ingredients that we have added. Now, this is something that's done fresh, a la minute, and right away brought out. One of the things that I've learned is out on the East Coast, sometime at this point, that they use a technique where they crash crackers and they add it to the mixture so that it binds to get a little bit more and also has some elements of flavor. It's good. I like it better this way, without the crackers. So here we are. The last thing that I'm going to do is an addition of chives. Why chives? I have a love for chives. I love the way they taste, I love the way they look, and I love the color that they bring in. And basically, believe it or not, we are done. All that I need to do now is to plate it. Let me show you how. Now look at these 3 rolls, and it seems such a simple preparation. What's there to be excited about? The truthfulness of all this is it all started with a lobster in the kitchen of the Stellino family in Palermo. To me, this is the coronation of a life lived well, full of passion, full of joy, full of love. My father and my mom gave me these huge opportunities, and not only by taking me here to America, but also by sharing with me the secrets of their cooking. And I was able here in America to assimilate all of these thoughts and be able to compound them with a lot of other lessons that I learned while I was here, and being able to create dishes like this that make me and all my friends smile. And this is how you make langoustine sliders.
Finally, my father was able to capture the lobster, put it into the pot, cover it with the pot cover until eventually the lobster subsided and provided for us the nourishment of that day. So every time I see a lobster. The first thing that I have in mind before I cook it is the very one moment in my life when it looked as if it was something that had been cut out of a comedy movie.
I love white chocolate pudding. How much? Oh, I sit up at night and I say to myself, what will I have for dessert today? And everybody says, you should have some fruit. And I say to them, no, I will have white chocolate pudding. Let me show you how to make it. This is best if you make it in the morning for dinner, or if you make it the night before for dinner, because it does need about 5 hours or so to become nice and hard in the refrigerator. Enough talking, let's snap into action. So in the pan that's nice and hot, the first thing that we do, we add the half and half. You can also add milk, but don't add cream alone. Cream will still work wonderfully well, but it's too heavy, I feel. Next thing, we go with the white chocolate. These days you can buy white chocolate just like the chocolate chips that we put inside the cookies. And at this point, the one thing that you want to do is to gently stir this over medium heat until all of the chocolate melts in there. At this point, there are several things that you could do. You could add chocolate liqueur if you want to. You could add rum. Rum is favored by the Italian bakers because it does not color the mixture. Chocolate liqueur, on the other hand, it would. But I like to maintain it simple, just exactly as it is. I just want the sugar and the chocolate to tell their story. Keep in mind, this is not a dish that you want to do on a daily basis because it will ruin your diet. Not because what you eat is too much, but because you're never gonna eat exactly one single portion. If you're anything like me, this could be a real problem. So do it sparingly once in a while, and when you do it, enjoy it. The white chocolate has melted completely. It's time for us to add the most important ingredient. Now, at this point, you want to have a whisk going at it continuously. And here we have the cornstarch. The cornstarch you want to break as soon as it hits the cream, and you want to maintain this continuous stirring for avoiding that the cornstarch solidifies into little balls on the inside. What some of the people do, they like to add this to the half and half before you add it to the chocolate. I do not favor the technique. The reason why I do not favor the technique is because I found that many times what happens to the cornstarch, it doesn't quite liquefy into the pudding, and you still have an aftertaste of the powderiness of the uncooked cornstarch. Mamma mia, that's a lot of words, and all of them in English and with no accent. Well, maybe there was a lot of accent. Anyway, we gotta go into this now. You want to bring this to a boil, and you want to see the beginning of a thickening. Look at this, it's starting to thicken up. And this is the point where you know that you're pretty much where you want to go. And at this point, what we do, we turn off the heat underneath, because the coagulation of this pudding, the finishing part of this pudding, will actually happen in the refrigerator. We're going to add this attentively inside the martini glass, one of my favorite containers. For this to get the consistency that we want, we need to place it in the refrigerator for a few hours. Now, one of the great things is that this one has two different layers at the top of it. One is obviously the chocolate, and I'm going to cover all of it with chocolate as much as I can. Why is this important? And why dark chocolate instead of the white chocolate? This is a thing of mine. I totally get into it. But the chocolate is not the only thing we're gonna put in. It's an enormous amount of chopped pistachio. Why? First and foremost, Sicily is known for its pistachio. Second part of it is that I want, with every bite that you take, to have a certain crustiness that flows around. And look how beautiful it is as I turn it around. You see all the elements of the chocolate, the toasted pistachio. And then, in typical Sicilian fashion, we have to put a little cherry on top, a maraschino cherry. Why? Because it's even sweeter than the dessert. I know, I'm 60 years old and I'm still talking about dessert as if I was a child, but this is not a dessert. This is a time machine. This is something that brings you back to when life was beautiful, wonderful. And if you're having a bad day, if things are not going your way, you know what? Make yourself a wonderful white chocolate pudding. Why? I'll tell you why. Because it will make your life a lot better. It makes me smile every time. And this is how you make white chocolate pudding.
And yet, I must say, these moments of silliness, of oddity, are the one things that really keeps me bound to this past of a have and to the importance of a family. Because even the things that go wrong, in this case, you know, attempting to cook the lobster, boil the lobster, are the one things that stayed in the history and the stories that we kept telling when I was 15, 16, 17. And still to this very day, when my brother and I get together once in a while, we talk about this very moment. I was very lucky to have had that moment. I was very lucky to have seen that moment with my family. And more than that, it was great to see my mom and my dad doing the kind of things that usually my brother and I did whenever we got into trouble. Yeah, it was quite something. That lobster was quite something. The more I think about it, the more I laugh.
Lobster stock.
Lobster stock. A very easy way of using the shell of a lobster and turn it into something magic.
Give me that one more time, a little more sexy.
Lobster sauce. Away.
Lobster socks.
He's the only one that got it. He's the only one that got it.
We're like socks.
Lobster socks. Lobster socks. Okay, one more time. Somebody on lobster stock, please.
Right?